Hello wine people, welcome to the video on vineyard management. This video is part of the Thirsty and Wise study and support program for students that are preparing for their WSET level 3 in wine course and exam. If you didn't watch the previous video on growing environment, please do, because this video will have more sense. Also, if you're following my advice, you understand how much I'm repeating and highlighting the importance of understanding the first 76 pages of the book. So following these videos for the first 76 pages of the book is crucial to have the full understanding and for all this puzzle to get together for you to have a full understanding. For this video, vineyard management, the idea is for you to understand that wine growers, they have a very important job in order to produce healthy grapes that are suited for a particular style, quality, and price of the wine that the winemakers want to produce. And in order for the grape growers to be able to do this, they need to have the full understanding how factors in the vineyards are affecting the style, quality, and price of the wine. This video I will divide in two videos because otherwise it would be too long. The first part of the video I'm going to be explaining site selection, planting and replanting, managing vine, training and pruning, the vineyard cycle. And the second part of the video, I will be explaining managing vineyard pests and diseases, viticulture practices, and harvesting. So a lot to cover. Please pay close attention and let's go. First things first, before any grapes are grown, the vineyard needs to be planted. And this is a super important decision because when you make it, there's no turning back. You're going to need to look at that vineyard and manage that vineyard for the next 30, 50 years. This is a very expensive thing to do, so you don't want to make a mistake on the beginning. Where to grow and which grape varieties to grow. So 3 considerations to think about before planting a vineyard are environmental conditions, business consideration, and grape varieties that you want to grow. Environmental factors in the vineyard that are going to be shaping the style of wines produced, style of grapes that are going to be produced for particular wines are temperature, sunlight hours, rainfall. So if you watched the previous video, you know that we're focusing on these 3 factors. Soil fertility and soil drainage, if there's any adjustment that needs to be done to the drainage of the soil. And these factors will dictate which grape varieties are more suited for that particular site. Planting density and training system will also be very important to understand which planting density and training system is actually well suited for that particular location. I will explain more in this video about the planting density and training system that are more well suited for particular sites. The business consideration is the vineyard proximity to the infrastructure like power, water. So you want to think about when planting your vineyards where the electricity and water is gonna come from. Workforce, if your vineyards are meant to be hand harvested, so you need to think about how easy it is to find people that are going to be working in the vineyard. Accessibility of machinery, if you're planning to use machinery in the vineyard, you need to structure the access to the vineyard, and also the topography of the vineyard is gonna dictate if the machinery actually can be used in that particular location. Cost of the land, of course, it's a big consideration because this will also affect the cost production of the wines that you're producing. Grape varieties that can be grown in particular location. This choice of which grape varieties can be used in that particular location can be, of course, dictated by the climate. So not every grape variety is well suited to a particular climate. Like Cabernet Sauvignon doesn't grow well in a cool climate. It doesn't ripen, where a Pinot Noir will get overripe in a warm climate. Demand can also be reason for which grape varieties are going to be grown. And of course legal, especially in Europe. Appellation system in Europe, they dictate actually which grape varieties can be grown in order for the appellation system to be used on the label. Planting and replanting. So new site needs to be, before planting the new site, so when you selected your site, before doing the planting, you need to clear the existing site from any vegetation, to remove any rocks that might interfere in the planting. Fertility check, in order for you to understand the soil, you need to check how fertile or unfertile it is. This will also dictate what kind of planting density you're going to use and what kind of training system you will use. Young vines, when they're planted, they are taken from nurseries and they're planted usually with the rootstock of the American vines. They're planted in the vineyard. They're fragile when they're young. They're usually also protected by plastic sleeves in order to protect it from any predators. And also young vines, they need good amount of water in the vineyard to be available in order to help with their growth. So usually first 3 years you're not going to have any crop, and the first crop is going to start with year number 3. So planting a vineyard is a very expensive process, and then also you need to wait 3 years for the first crop to grow. Vines usually they grow grapes up to 30-50 years, after which the vine can still produce grapes, but the quantity of the wine will be reduced, which also usually results in, because of the lower quantity of the wine or the grapes that are produced, the quality of the wine increases, but the amount of grapes produced reduces. So the wine growers, they need to strike a good balance between producing grapes, but also to do it in a commercial sense. After you take out the vines that are no longer commercially viable, usually it's recommended for 3 years for that land not to be replanted again, and you need to replenish it with nutrients. So this replanting needs to be carefully planned and managed. Managing the vine. So few terms that you need to understand what they mean: training, pruning, trellising, vine density. I'll explain all of that. All of this will depend, what kind of training, pruning, trellising and vine density will depend on the temperature, sunlight, water and nutrients, and also for the practical reason of maybe if you're going to be using machinery can be used only in the well-organized vineyards that require trellising systems. I'll explain everything. And all of this will also be connected with grapes, producing grapes of desired quality and quantity. The first term that you need to understand is vine training. Vine training, the definition is, it is the shape of the permanent wood. There's 2 types of vine training. The vines can either be head trained or cordon trained. Both systems can be lower trained towards the ground in order to benefit from the heat of the soil, or to be trained high in order to avoid frost settling on the bottom of the soil. Head training means that the permanent wood is the trunk, the body of the vine, and the head can have maybe a little bit of permanent wood on top. So head trained means that you have the body of the vine and that's your main permanent wood, versus a cordon trained has more permanent wood. So next to the body of the vine, you're going to have cordons that are also called arms that are also permanent wood. Permanent wood is considered everything that is more than 1 year old. And what kind of training system you're going to be using in the vineyard will depend on the conditions in the vineyard. I'll be explaining more in detail. Okay. So vine pruning. What means vine pruning? Vine pruning means shaping and limiting the vine size by green harvesting and leaf stripping, cutting excess wood from the vine. There's two types of vine pruning. So the vine is either going to be spur pruned, or the vine is going to be replacement cane pruned. Spur pruned means that the vine is going to be shaped by small spurs which have 2 to 3 buds that are going to be carrying the fruit for the next year, versus cane pruning, which means that the cane is a long 1-year-old wood that has up to 20 buds. Also, vine pruning can be done in the winter. That is done in the winter when the vine is dormant and it's estimating the amount of yields that are going to be produced for that year, estimating. And the pruning can also be done in the summer, which is called green harvesting, which means that you're going to be removing the excess foliage and also maybe excess grapes that are produced in a particular year. Trellising is the supporting system that is necessary in order for the vineyards to be organized, and this usually consists of wires and poles on the end of the vineyards on which the vines are trained. So there's vineyards that are trellised, which means that they have poles and they have wires, and the vineyards can also be untrellised. The purpose of trellising or managing the vineyards is to manage the access of sunlight, air circulation, and also to allow mechanization if you're planning to use it in the vineyard. You need to understand that machinery in the vineyard, in order, for example, to trim the vines, can only be done in a well-organized trellised vineyards. Vine density. So vine density means the amount of vines that are planted per hectare or acre. Acre is a smaller, acre is usually 40% of 1 hectare. So 1 hectare is 100 meters by 100 meters. So acre is 40% of that. Limited water availability. So the amount of vines, density, the amount of vines that are going to be planted per certain area will depend on water availability and nutrients. that are available. So in the book you have three scenarios, three types of vineyards on which you have different type of vine density. So let me explain. The first type of vineyard is limited water availability. This means because you have lack of water in the vineyards, and this is usually associated with regions that are warm and dry. Example is central Spain. So when you have this kind of vineyards that have low water availability, you need to, this means that the vines are struggling because they're having a lack of resources like water. So in order for the vines to have enough water in order not to die from drought, the competition between the vines need to be reduced. And this is done by planting low density vineyards. It means that the vines are going to be planted further away from each other in order for the vines not to compete for the available water in the soil. And also because you're going to be in this kind of warm, dry conditions, you're going to have a very intense sunshine. You will actually want to have vineyards trained like bush wines. In order for the bush wines to, by its leaves, to protect the grapes from sunburn. So this is an example of central Spain vine density. A second example is low levels of nutrients in the soil and sufficient amount of rainfall. So this is a scenario, for example, in Bordeaux, where you have more than enough water and you have sufficient amount of nutrients in the soil. So because you have plenty of resources like nutrients and water, and you want to encourage the vines actually to focus on production of ripe grapes instead of growing the foliage, you need to restrict the amount of water and nutrients available to each vine. And the way to do this is by increasing the competition in the vineyard. And the way that you're going to be doing this is by increasing the planting density. So for this reason, you're going to be planting 10,000, usually up to 10,000 vines per hectare. So it means the vines are going to be closely planted to each other, like 1 meter apart. This will increase the competition between the vines in order to spread the high amount of nutrients and water that is available. And usually the vines are going to be using a vertical shoot positioning system with cane pruning. I'll explain more. The third scenario is high levels of nutrients available in the soil with a sufficient amount of rainfall. So this is a scenario, for example, in New Zealand, where you have where you have soils with high amount of nutrients and rainfall. So again, you have a lot of resources available to the vine. So in order to make the vine focus on ripening the grapes, you need to increase the competition again. But in this case, you have too much water and nutrients available. And just by having a high planting density like in Bordeaux is not enough to increase the competition. So in this case, what you need to do is you actually need to have a lower planting density, but growing bigger vines with more permanent wood, because vines with more permanent wood, they require more nutrients and water in order to sustain the growth. Okay, I hope this was clear. Yields. So yields means the amount of grapes that are produced from a certain area. And this can be measured by hectares, tons of grapes per hectare or acre. So grapes, the amount of grapes per certain area, or certain amount of wine produced per certain area. Usually hectoliters are used. 1 hectoliter is 100 liters. Yields are also directed by legal requirements. So especially in Europe, certain appellation system, they have certain requirements of how much grapes and wines can be produced from a certain area. Quality, the idea is that lower quantity of wines produced will increase the quality, and vice versa. More quantity will lower the quality. And also you need to think about your storage space in the winery. How much wine you can actually process and how much wine you actually can store in your winery. Yields are estimated by the number of buds in the winter pruning, but this is an estimate. And for example, you can estimate a certain amount of grapes that are going to be produced, but then you can have, for example, a bad vintage where spring frost can reduce the amount of flowers that are going to be pollinated and will become berries. Or maybe you're going to have more water and nutrients in the soil that will produce higher yields than expected. Green harvesting, so pruning, removing the excess grapes in the summer, can corrugate the amount of yields that will be produced, but this can also be compensated naturally by the vine actually producing bigger grapes in order to compensate for the removed fruit. So managing and balancing the amount of yields is not easy. The idea with yields is to produce lower quantity of grapes in order to increase the quality, but this is also not really straightforward because different vineyards, they have different amounts of nutrients and water available and the amount of sunshine and heat available in the vineyard. So this is different amount of yields will produce different quality depend on the factors in the vineyard. Wine cycle. So wine cycle means the vine grows throughout the year, and at different times in the year it will have different stages in its life cycle. So the life cycle of the vine is winter dormancy in December to March. You also need to understand this is the months here that I'm saying is for Northern Hemisphere. You need to understand that Southern Hemisphere is 6 months in advance from Northern Hemisphere. So winter dormancy in Northern Hemisphere is December to March. Bud burst is March to April. Early shoot and leaf growth is from March to May. Flowering and fruit set is May to June. Veraison and berry ripening is from July to September. And harvest is from September to October. So let me explain what happens to the vine in each of these months. Winter dormancy, so again, happens from December to March in Northern Hemisphere. In winter dormancy, it means the temperature in the vineyards is gonna drop. The shoots that were green during the growing season will become woody. Leaves will fall. Carbohydrates will be stored in the roots, and the winter freeze can be an issue. It can kill the vines, so in order to protect the vines from winter freeze, earth piling, meaning you're going to be piling the earth on top of the vine in order to protect it from not not having an issue with winter freeze that can actually break the vine. Bud burst will happen in March, from March to April, and this happens when the temperatures in the vineyard reach around 10 degrees Celsius. The vine is going to start to wake up, and it's going to start to bud. From the buds, the shoots are going to come out. This is a very delicate part of the growing cycle of the vine because the vine is very fragile. Spring frost can reduce or destroy the yields, and especially in a cool continental climate. And at this point, spraying will start if chemicals are used in the vineyard, like herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides. Early shoot and leaf growth starts from March to May. So shoot grows and flowers start to flower. Carbohydrates that are stored during the winter dormancy in the root system are going to be used for the initial energy that the vine uses to bud and creates initial shoots and leaves. And these carbohydrates are going to be replaced by the photosynthesis, which are going to produce the complex carbohydrates for the continuing growth of the foliage and also ripening of the grapes. Water is needed in this initial growth of the vine. Shoots are going to be tied if they're trained in the vineyard, and spraying will continue. Flowering and fruit set happens in May to June. So in this period, it is very important for the vine to have enough heat and sunshine that is needed for pollinated grapes. So every berry that gets pollinated will become a berry. So for this to happen, the vine needs to have sunshine, heat, and not having rain. So color is issue in the vineyard. That means that a higher amount than usual flowers are not pollinated, which reduces the amount of yields produced. Millerandage is issue in the vineyard where the pollinated flowers became berries, but because of the lack of sunshine and heat, they didn't develop fully. So they can usually be smaller berries or berries without seeds. And the spraying will continue. Verizon and berry ripening happens in July to September. So Verizon is a sign that the vines are transferring its energy for the berries to ripen. This happens 6 to 8 weeks after the fruit set. Grapes, so what happens at Verizon? Grapes start to change color, they swell with water, flavors ripen, acidity falls, and tannins start to develop. Warm and sunny conditions are needed. Water stress is encouraged to happen after Verizon because water stress makes a signal to the vine that it actually needs to focus on ripening the grapes instead of growing the foliage, which is no longer needed after Verizon. Green harvesting can happen before Verizon, but again, the vine is very smart. It can actually compensate the removal of the fruit by increasing the size of the fruit, which will dilute the flavors of the wine. Harvest will happen in September to October. This period, it's very important for the weather to be dry, not to have rain, and any spraying needs to stop well before the harvest so the chemicals do not finish in the grapes and in the wine. Okay. And that's it. I'll see you in the next video where we're gonna be continuing with managing diseases in the pests and diseases in the vineyard, and also talk about harvesting. Until then, stay thirsty and wise.